Hello, everybody. Welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today it's Tuesday, the 16th of July, 2024. My name is CareyHolzman. Thank you so much for joining me today as we explore more computers, technology, and I would be remiss if I didn't say deals at Amazon Prime on computers and technology. Now, I'm not a paid representative of Amazon. Yes, I use Amazon affiliate links when and where I can. Unless you're buying an item that's more than $1,000, the commissions I make are very, very tiny, just a couple of dollars. But they do add up if you use them. And I certainly appreciate those who contribute to the show in that way. Your pricing for whatever you're buying at Amazon doesn't change at all. Nothing changes on your side of things. It's just that because our link took you there, any purchase you make once our link takes you there, regardless of the product link, just the fact that our link took you to Amazon, any purchase you make on anything in Amazon will generate back a commission anonymously for this channel. I have no idea who's buying. I can see what was sold at what price, so I know how much commission Amazon owes me, but I have no idea who's making those purchases. So if it's stuff you're buying anyway, it's really kind of you to use our link to help support us here so we don't have to take on sponsorships where I'm reading a script from Amazon about Prime Day. So if I'm telling you about deals about Prime Day, it's no different than one friend telling another friend, hey, did you see they had such and such on sale at the so-and-so store, right? You're just helping a friend. And a friend might say, I don't want one of those, or I'm not interested. Fine. Just thought you'd want to know. So it is Amazon Prime Day, the start of it. And I think it goes on tomorrow, and then that's the end. Not everything is on sale, and some people have criticized Amazon for not really having a good deal, right? And that's true of any, if you look at Black Friday sales we have here in the US, a lot of things you can buy cheaper. And there's some things that are a bargain. And not everything at Costco, the membership warehouse, is cheaper than Walmart. So you've got to be a savvy shopper and understand what the value of something is worth. Also, Amazon doesn't always set the prices for their products. Sometimes, many times, there's a third-party seller who dictates that. So if you see some very obvious price increase prior to Prime Day, only to make it look like they're offering a discount, that's a third-party company in most cases participating with Amazon Prime Day. And as a result, Target and Walmart all run their own specials to compete. So if Amazon's having a Prime Day, if Amazon's just created this holiday sale just out of the blue, what do you think Target and Walmart are going to do? Just sit there and let all their customers go to Amazon? They have to respond. So you can find deals there at Walmart and Target and other large department stores that are responding to this every time Amazon does this to try and they want your business just as badly as Amazon does. I've seen people comment on things like people add things to their cart waiting to see if they go on sale on Amazon Prime Day. Amazon sells, I believe, I know it's over 10 million products, and it might be at 100 million products at this point. I'm not sure how many products they have. And maybe what goes on Prime Day are 8% of those products. So if you have 5 or 6 items in your cart, what's the likelihood that any of those items will fall into that 8% of inventory? That being said, if it's an Amazon product, like an Amazon Kindle or Amazon Fire Stick, all that stuff is generally on sale. But Amazon will flub around with the price a little bit. The Fire Stick 4K Max is a $49.99 device, I believe, but I've never seen it sold for that. Amazon typically says, normally $49.99. when it's really normally $35. Today, I think it's $25, but they'll say that's 50% off the $49.99. So they do play games like that. And some things are the same price they sell for regularly. And you can use camel.com, 3 camels, camel.com. 3 camels would have been a much shorter name. And you can just copy and paste the link to whatever Amazon product you're interested in and see what its price has been in the past if you're not sure if it's a deal or not. But if it's a real good deal, any hesitation, there's a good chance it'll sell out before you get back to it to order it. So a lot of this is first come, first serve. And so to alleviate this, what Amazon has promised to do is to release sales in batches throughout the day and tomorrow. What happened early on is they put everything out there like a Black Friday sale, and all the early birds got everything. And so by noon, it was all gone. And Amazon's always focused on the East Coast for starting and ending sales, which means if you live on the West Coast, you've got to get up even earlier. So Amazon's trying to counter that by releasing deals throughout the day. And they typically do focus on East Coast time when they're releasing the deals. When are people having lunch on the East Coast? When are people coming home from work on the East Coast? So people on the West Coast, you need to be on East Coast time if you want to be one of those early birds to catch those deals. They have sales on everything: monitors, mini PCs, gaming PCs, did I say routers? NAS devices, external hard drives, internal hard drives, CPUs, a lot of Intel and AMD CPUs on sale, some motherboards, some cases. It is a little bit of everything. And so I'm not going to sit here and read all the deals to you, because quite frankly, there were some really good deals that I'm pretty sure are sold out by now. One of which was like a refurbished Minis Forum PC for under $200. And it was, when we reviewed it here, I think it was $400. And I can't imagine they had many of those. And I couldn't tell you the model. I can't remember. But I imagine they probably sold out by now. So there are deals on refurbished products as well as Amazon warehouse products today, not just new stuff. And again, not everything is sold by Amazon. Even if it's an Amazon Prime offer, the prices may be dictated, or in fact, they are dictated in most cases by the manufacturer, not by Amazon. So just keep that in mind. If you're offended at a price that's not a discount, it's likely the manufacturer setting that price and not Amazon. Well, you know, they're trying to convince you to part with your money. That's anyway. If you find any good deals for anything that you've purchased, share it with us, because I don't know what you guys are interested in, and I don't want to go through all the list. Again, Amazon's not paying me to do this, but I'd be very curious what has been on your shopping list, or any good deals that you found that others in the chat might also appreciate knowing about. Because I have no idea. I'm not buying anything. Everything I'm buying right now is to get Studio C done. And it's coming along really, really well. We're super excited. Maybe by the end of this month, we can be broadcasting in there if all goes well. So today, for today's video, part of the cleanup in Studio B to get ready to move over to Studio C is to go through some of the excess inventory that I'm not quite sure what the status of. Sometimes I get so busy I have to set something aside for later, and then later becomes 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, I don't even know. And this is that example. We have an ASUS Prime X570 Pro motherboard here with a CPU on it that doesn't have any brackets. It doesn't have any RAM. I don't think it's got any storage. And I think there's something wrong with it. I don't know. And it might have been set aside for either a motherboard RMA replacement. Likely the CPU is fine. Or maybe I took it out to replace it with something else that somebody wanted to buy. But that doesn't explain why I took the RAM and the storage device out. I think that's the part that puzzles me. I think the storage device. Yeah, I don't see a storage device in here. So essentially, I am starting from scratch, unless anybody in the chat room remembers where this came from. I don't remember its history. I have started making notes because this is happening to me more and more. The busier I get and the older I get, the less I am capable of juggling so many things. And I get so busy that so much time passes that without any note to remind me what the history of this is, like I don't need every detail. I just need to jar my memory. And I say, oh yeah, I remember now. But I have no recollection, zero, of where this came from and why I have it. And this isn't alone. I have several boards, at least two anyway. I don't know, does two count as several? I've got a couple of boards in this condition where they're sitting unknown. Now, the boards typically have a 2 to 3 year warranty. So we're fine as far as, if a customer's not waiting on this, this is not a high priority to get this back to the manufacturer for a replacement. Also, these boards are less valuable. So even if we were to exceed the warranty, let's say the warranty is 2 years or 3 years on this ASUS board, and we're already past that, then this ASUS board has no value to begin with. It wouldn't even be worth mailing in. So hopefully the board's okay. I'm relatively certain the CPU is just fine. We very rarely ever get a bad CPU. And as for the RAM and storage, usually when I do stuff like this, it's because I've used everything else that I verified is good while diagnosing something that's bad. And oftentimes when we get down to diagnostics to a CPU and motherboard, it usually means one or the other is bad. And I've seen 100 bad motherboards and like 4 bad CPUs. And that's just within the last few years. In 30 years of my career, it's very, very rare to get a bad CPU. It happens, but not as often as a bad motherboard happens. And quite often when we change the motherboard, usually you can't even get the same socket anymore. Like, so much time has passed that trying to buy an older motherboard costs as much or more than a modern motherboard. So you might as well just change the CPU out with it. Now, we haven't reached that point with this board. It's not that old. But I just cannot remember why it's in this shape. I suspect it needed more diagnostics, and I wanted to try it with different RAM and a different SSD. And I needed the RAM and SSD for something. I have no idea how we got here, but it all has to get either recycled, sold, or identified properly so we know where to put it in Studio C, or even whether or not it's worth bringing over there, right? So that's what I want to look at today. So I've got some RAM here, and I've just got a generic AMD cooler. I'm going to have to find these little brackets. I know I have some around here. This clearly had a liquid cooler on it at some point. I just cannot remember for the life of me what case I had this in or why it got pulled apart. So it doesn't matter. We're going to start from scratch as though a customer brought this to me and is unable to describe the problem. We'll figure it out. It sure would have been helpful if I'd have left myself some notes. All right. If I do this to myself enough, like if I punish myself by doing this and making myself work harder, that'll probably be the kick in the pants I need to realize writing the note takes a lot less effort than going back through the whole rediscovery process. Hello to everybody joining us in the chat room. Hello to our friends Ron Barnish and Mark Baggett. David Graham with a $2 super chat. Thank you, David. Hello to Charles Purdy. Welcome in, Charles. Just became a member for 1 month. Right on. Hello to Avery Ramstorff and Mark Gaines. Shamim Kajvirez. Chris Johnson. Ajin Guy 908. Andy Kane and Mark Baggett saying hello. Barry Klein says hello. Welcome in, everybody. Jose Lopez with a $1 super chat. Thank you, Jose. And Joe Martin joining us. Welcome in, everybody. All right, so here's what I want to do. First thing is, around the CPU socket with AMD motherboards, there are these little plastic stands that have to come out along with a backplate. Usually, you reuse the backplate when you put on a third-party cooler. Sometimes the third-party coolers come with their own backplate. This is what I say, this was a Prime X570 Pro. So I think the first thing I need to do is figure out if I have a Prime X570 Pro motherboard box, which I did not see in here. Prime X570, because in the motherboard box, we would have put all those extra pieces and parts. But I only have, just looking around here, I do not have a Prime X570 Pro motherboard box. So what that tells me, I'm looking around at my inventory and I have a place for empty boxes. It's not there. It does not exist. So that's an interesting twist. That's not like me. So I'm very curious how we got to this point. I bet there's an interesting story here. I'm still looking around if there's possibly somewhere I misplaced it, but no, a motherboard box is pretty big. It would stand out. Okay, so what that tells me is wherever I set these components that came on the board were likely in the motherboard box. And maybe I forgot to take them out. I don't have any documentation, not that I would use it. But usually all those extra things go into the motherboard box, and all we have just a board and a CPU. Now the CPU on this, and maybe I can search through my video history to look for a build featuring a Ryzen 9 3900X. That's actually a really good chip. That explains why we used a liquid cooler on it. We used some kind of a third-party cooler on this. The 3900X was a pretty hot chip. I think I have spare clips on these. Or, you know, I don't even need the clips. This CPU cooler screws down. I just need the back plate, and I think I've got one under the desk. I think. I remember that our friend Patrick over at Serve the Home was in a bit of a bind and was asking me if I had an extra set of those. And I didn't. And I said, you know what? That's a good idea. I should have an extra set. And then I sent him the link to Amazon, and I said, the good news is you can just order that from Amazon, and they'll have it to you tomorrow. And that's what he ended up doing. And then I did the same thing. I thought, you know what? That's a great idea. I should totally do that too. Now, I put it away. I thought I put it down here. Oh, wait, I think I found it. Here we go. So I have a big mess under there, but the idea behind putting that stuff there is it's right at my feet. I just have to scour through a pile. There's not a very good organization. It's an organized pile. But you can see I've taken the components, placed them into a bag with the screws and the back plate. So I think we just need the back plate here, which will leave this bag incomplete as far as being able to use it on another board. This must have been part of the kit I bought off Amazon, because this is in a plastic bag and everything. So I think this is brand new. It's really hard to tell. Is this something I took off of a board and saved? Or is this part of a kit I bought from Amazon? I don't know. Either way, it works out to be the same. It's just, I'm kind of curious, how did I get here? Talking Heads reference. That should just go right back here. And I'm not going to worry about heat. I want to see if the board works. First of all, I don't want to go through the effort of putting a liquid cooler on this, only to find out we have a motherboard problem and have to take everything back out. So we'll use this cooler for now. That'll be fine. We're not going to stress this out with that cooler on it, but we will be able to determine its status. And I think I have a delivery showing up here. So that should be all we need. This already has screws on it. And I'll just set this aside because if the board is bad, I believe we have to send the board back to ASUS in the same condition we received it. So if this board shipped with a back plate and these little plastic cooler holders, whatever they're called, we need to put those back on. Because if we ship without that, then ASUS will likely bill us for it or not include it on the replacement board. That also means if we ship it with a CPU or with storage, any customization of the board, even your M.2 screws, it's likely ASUS will keep those. when you send back a product for warranty repair, you need to strip everything you've changed off of that product. So in the case of a motherboard, you take your CPU out, you take out your RAM, you take out your storage, and with ASUS, you take out your M.2 screws. They will not send them back to you. Ask me how I know. Let me check the door real quick. I apologize. I'm expecting a mini PC, and I don't want to leave it outside. All right, I have received a review unit not intended for commercial purposes. I don't know which review unit it is, but we'll set that aside and open that up after the show so I can get back to this distraction first. Now, before I put the cooler on it, let me clean it up a little bit. It's been sitting, it's kind of dusty, and it only takes a minute to grab some isopropyl alcohol in a Q-tip. Not that this is required, but strongly recommended. Bajan Guy said he's using an ASUS X570P motherboard with a Ryzen 6. What's a Ryzen 6? Ron Varnish says, I did an old video about replacing the chipset fan. I remember that, but was it this board? I've had more than one X570 board. This is the third or fourth or fifth one. Could have been this board. It's possible. Wow, these Q-tips are just coming out totally black. So even though it didn't look that dirty to the naked eye, I'm glad I'm doing this because that certainly will impede the heat transfer to the cooler. And this is already a hot chip. I would say this cooler really isn't adequate for everyday use on this chip, but for our needs today, it should be. It'll get the job done. It's the bare minimum, I suppose you could say. So we'll clean the surface of the internal heat spreader there, and then we're also going to clean the mating surface here on the bottom of the cooler. So even though the cooler's fairly large, it's got no center copper heat transfer, and aluminum just doesn't do as good of a job of heat transfer, and that's why I think this cooler is going to be inadequate. If it had a copper center that helped to grab that heat and transfer it, given its size, it would probably do the trick. And it's entirely possible this will do the trick all on its own. I don't think it will, though. As I recall, the 3900X was a hot chip, but you know, that was based on the standards a couple of years ago when that came out. Today, hot chips are even hotter than this. So my perspective may have changed. We'll see what happens here. Still a lot of black coming up off these coolers. And you'll often see that with coolers, by the way, where you can just keep scrubbing and scrubbing and you're actually pulling up little bits of metallic material out of the porous surfaces. And you know what? At some point, it's good enough. You know, it's better than it was, and it likely won't make much actual difference with the dissipation of the heat by more than a fraction of a degree. But the bulk of it, you know, could make more of a 2 to 3 degree difference. So even then, it's still pretty minor, and that's why this isn't critical. It's just, why wouldn't you? If you could get a couple degrees cooler for little effort for stuff we already have on hand, why not use it? That's why I have it. Would I go to the store and buy it? Buy a box of Q-tips and isopropyl alcohol to clean one CPU for one test that I don't even know if the board's bad? No. But because I already have it, of course I'm going to use it. Otherwise, what's the point of having it? All right, so let me get some thermal compound on this bad boy. We're going to spread the thermal compound on the CPU, not on the cooler. We only use one kind of thermal compound. Doesn't matter what you want to use. They all work pretty much the same. And if you don't believe me, test it yourself and tell me the results of your test. Buy the cheapest thermal compound, buy the most expensive thermal compound, and keep in mind that the temperature of your room is going to fluctuate. So you've got to give yourself a 3-degree error of margin. So if it's a negative, if it's running 3 degrees cooler or 3 degrees hotter after you've changed the thermal compound, that may be the condition of the room. So you need to repeat that test 3 times in reverse order, just to ensure that the heat of the room will give you a good average. And I think you're going to find any differences almost unnoticeable or repeatable. It's negligible and ultimately a waste of time and money to replace one thermal compound with another unless that thermal compound is improperly applied or is very old and dried out. But yeah, to go and get something expensive is likely a product intended for extremists who are using liquid nitrogen and trying to hit new records of frequency, even if it means toasting the chip after 15 minutes, just so they can say, oh, we hit 7 gigahertz. I don't think any of you do that. So you don't need that kind of expensive thermal material. But if you want it, don't let me get in your way. So I'm just going to use this nitrile glove here to spread this thermal compound, and I don't think I put enough on there. So let me put a little bit more. Even that may not be enough. Let's see. What I'm doing here is just finger painting the thermal compound on. And the reason I do it this way is I don't have any faith in trusting that a dab put in the center or some pattern is going to spread evenly every time with the number of systems that I build. And the only way to know is to take the cooler off and look at it. The only other way to know is to make sure you have an even spread across the entire surface of your heat spreader here on top of the CPU before you put the cooler on it. It's common sense. And then I tap on it, and what it does is it makes these little hills and valleys all over the thermal compound. And what that's going to do is that's going to close in any sort of opportunity for these supposed air bubbles that really don't make any difference in cooling anyway. You're allowed to have air bubbles. That's why it's not an airtight system. But, you know, people on the internet, they just make stuff up. They lack a proper thermal dynamics education academically, and so they fill in the gaps with what makes sense to them. And if you don't have a degree in or professional experience in thermodynamics, you're going to say, well, that makes sense. And I make fun of this all the time because I see it everywhere. Alex Jones used to do this kind of nonsense where you'd say, because I lack an education, the only way that this makes any sense, and then you fill in the blank with just a preposterous concept you have that just you pulled out of thin air. We have schools and we have teachers and we have the ability to become educated, but don't let that get in the way, right? Like people will say, no Indy 500 car has ever won the Indy 500 that didn't have stickers on it. So clearly, stickers make the car go faster. I mean, that's obvious, right? This is the example of someone uneducated or any conspiracy theorist, right? They don't have any real evidence. They go, well, look at the video. And for all you know, the source of that video has been manipulated. That's not the original video. Or they go, look at the behavior of this person. Why would somebody behave this way? Okay, that's for you to ask them. You don't know why. Well, clearly their intentions are evil. No, it's not clear. Clearly, you're making this all up in your head, and people are believing you. It's bizarre. There used to be a joke, I remember, back in the 1970s, where a scientist would get a frog and say, jump, and the frog would jump. And then he would cut a leg off of the frog and say, jump, and the frog would jump. And when he cut the last leg off of the frog, so the frog had no more legs left, and he said, jump, The frog did not jump. And the scientists concluded when you cut the legs off of a frog, it becomes deaf. Now, that was the 1970s, and we were making fun of people like that. Now, on the internet, there's almost more people like that than critical thinkers and common sense. So I tell you this and share this with you because the conspiracy theorists and reality deniers seem to find a way of coping that is as bad as a Holocaust denier, a moon landing denier, the flat earthers. I've never seen such a widespread infection of denial and delusion. And I hope by telling you this, I make you aware. So think of it as your vaccine, just to recognize it when you see it. Always consider the source of information. It's frightening how many followers Alex Jones has and all of the supplements and nonsense that he sold and continues to sell. Wow. Just wow. Anyway, I went off on a little tangent there, but we see this a lot in the tech world where people will offer tech advice, but they don't understand what the tech advice precisely does. In other words, they don't have an education in it. They have an experience. And they go, look, I can offer to help you. If you click this and you click that, this will solve your problem. And you go, but why? I don't know why. If they're honest, this is what they'll tell you. All I know is if you follow this particular ritual, you will get this particular result. I don't want information from somebody who cannot tell me why. I'm just not interested. Clearly, they learned that from somebody. I'd like to know who you learned it from and trace my way back to the source. Because I'm a critical thinker and I want to understand by reverse engineering, if need be, why is this the result? And then when you find out why, you realize several of the clicks were totally unnecessary and could have been completely avoided to get to the same exact end result, but you don't know any better. So what ends up happening is you follow the same dance routine so you can get from here to there to get to the result you want. And come to find out, you only needed 1/10 of that dance routine to get the exact same result. You worked harder than you needed to. You did work you didn't need to do. And then if you don't understand that, then you continue to propagate the same false information to somebody else. You're like, oh, I had that problem too here. And then and around it goes all over the internet. So as you can imagine, as a experienced computer technician, how frustrating that is for me that when I offer people advice, and I will typically offer a point of reference for verification, it's frustrating to me that people are not asking for reference points. In other words, give me a reason for me to believe what you're saying. Who are you? And what gives you the authority to tell me what you're saying is true? Who are you? Are you someone in the industry? Are you just someone sitting in a garage somewhere with no experience in the industry? I think that's the first question that should be on your mind when you're getting information from anybody online. Who's the source? And if this source is unrecognizable, treat the information, value the information equal to the source. If you have a source you know and trust, that can ease the burden on wondering, is this true? And that's becoming more and more critical, establishing a source of trustworthiness in this world that appears to be, especially with the advent of AI, becoming more and more it's getting harder to tell the difference between what's true and what's lies, to the point that people are denying reality now more than I've ever seen. That did not happen. Whatever they showed or whatever I've heard is not true. You know, the World Trade Center never fell, or it's just crazy. And it's all just a coping mechanism of a lack of information that's filled in with imagination so these folks can get through their day. And it's unfortunate because of how popular it's become. It used to be a small fraction. Now it's, scares me. I'm scared. All right, let's see what we can do here. Now, normally, I wouldn't tighten this down with an electric driver. However, I had a friend tell me SpaceX can't possibly land a rocket. That's not possible. They're lying to you. I said, well, what about all the people that fly out to Florida and Vandenberg Air Force Base or whatever? They go out there and they watch it. What are they seeing? Have you ever gone and watched it? No, but it's not possible. I go, well, go and watch it. That's not video effects. You can go see it. I don't know. I don't know. All right, that's good enough for now. It's just a temporary solution while we try and figure out where the heck we are with this build. Because if this board is fine, I've got lots of extra cases. I could build this up. And then even if it's not sold to somebody, even if it still has to get moved over to Studio C, I'll be moving just a computer case with all the components already inside versus all the components individually, including the case. So that's going to make the move less bulky. Let's see, one of these headers is a CPU fan. Which one is it? CPU fan, all-in-one fan. What's this third one? Doesn't tell me. On the circuit board, it tells me what two of them are, but we have three of them. And what's the third one? Well, I'm going to guess. Usually, I just need to look at the circuit board writing to determine which fan header is which. But on this motherboard, we have three fan headers, one here, one right down there. And I'm going to, usually I would think the one closest to the CPU fan is the one we would use, but the writing on the board suggests otherwise. I could be misinterpreting the writing on the board, but I don't know. We're going to just try some, as long as the CPU fan is turning. If we have it in the wrong header, the BIOS may say no CPU fan is detected, even though it's spinning. That would suggest that we've plugged it into the wrong place. Now, I've got some RAM sitting here. Lodging guy says, Carey, I used your technique of applying thermal paste on my last build a couple of months ago. You're welcome to apply your thermal compound any way you see fit. I just show you the way I do it, and I explain why I do it that way. I'm not trying to convince you to do it my way. Find a way that works for you that you're happy with, and that's all that matters. But I'm glad that you saw the light. All right, so we'll put some RAM in here. I've got some of this Orion RGB from Guile, G-E-I-L. And the Guile RAM is supposed to be, this has, I guess it tells you the RGB is compatible with ASUS Aura software, ASRock, Polychrome, BioStars Sync, Gigabytes, RGB 2.0, and MSIs. Okay, I've got some others that have a Ryzen logo on it. I thought that's what this was, just that they promote that they've been tested with Ryzen specifically. I've had some RAM compatibility issues with Ryzen in the past, but that's been a while, so I think we're going to be okay. Let me flip this way, and I think we use these gray slots first. Yes, we're going to use the gray ones first. No, I put it in backwards. It's clearly not going in. Let's go this way. That's not going in. Hold on a second. What's going on here? Why is that not aligning? That is off. What is happening here? Oh, this is DDR5? Oh, I did not realize this was DDR5. I mean, it's got a big 5 on the package. You think I could have seen that. DDR4 and DDR5 are virtually identical to the naked eye. Don't force anything to fit. You won't damage it if you don't force it. So with DDR5, it'll be called PC5. It'll say PC5 somewhere if it doesn't say DDR5 on it. And if you see PC5, that's DDR5. If you see PC4, that's DDR4. If you see PC3, that's usually written somewhere on the little sticker on the RAM, and it's just a quick little tip from your Uncle Carey there, how you can identify. Now, wow, I had no idea this is DDR5. This was in the wrong stack of RAM. I separate out my DDR4 and DDR5 so that this doesn't happen. And clearly I've dropped the ball there. So just like I did with not making notes on this motherboard. All right, so I have this other Orion RAM, and this is what I was referring to with the Ryzen logo. Now, normally when I'm buying RAM for Intel boards, I don't look for any Intel compatibility. But when I'm buying, or assembling rather, an AMD board, because of the really difficult experience I've had with some RAM compatibility issues in the past, which I think have been all resolved through updated memory modules from the manufacturers and updated BIOSes from the motherboard makers, it's still like PTSD. So I'm not saying I will only use Ryzen branded RAM, but if I've got it, if I've already got it on hand, that's my first choice, because to put this in an Intel system will work, but then pretty much any RAM works with an Intel system. With an AMD system, based on my previous experience, getting the compatible RAM can make the job so much less frustrating. So that's where we're going to start with. And I guess this is brand new. I've never, from the looks of it, never opened this before. Now this RAM is not RGB. This is just going to be black. That's fine. Fits much better. Who knew? Weather here it'll be 110 degrees Fahrenheit or more for the next 7 to 10 days, minimum. So yeah, having working air conditioning and staying indoors as much as possible throughout the, when you look up at an Arizona sky, there's typically no clouds. It's just a bright sun with no wind. It's sort of like an oven. And the sun feels very, very hot without any shade or wind. So to be out in that sunlight is fine for a few minutes. And of course, the older you are, the more susceptible you become to the effects. The ultraviolet light is just incredibly strong. And it's incredibly bright. Very, very bright. Oftentimes, sunglasses don't even cut it. So shade, some kind of a breeze can make all the difference in the world. And because there's very little trees and there's very little wind, now Las Vegas has a lot of wind. Phoenix, not so much. So I find it best to try and stay indoors during the afternoon. If you got to go out and walk the dog, you do that early in the morning or later at night. And dogs can get their feet burned on the pavement. So even if you think you're going to be okay, yeah, that's almost cruel to take a dog out in the middle of the afternoon for a walk. They do make little booties, but not everybody uses them, and it's really upsetting to witness. Okay, so let me throw a power supply on here. Use the power supply we've been using here. This NZXT 750 is what I got laying around. It's way overkill for our needs, so we know we're not going to have any power supply issues, I'll tell you that. I don't need to add that to my diagnostic. With using brand new RAM and using a known good power supply, what I'm doing is I'm trying to reduce the number of things that are potentially causing a problem if this board has a problem by using parts as much as possible that are either brand new or verified as working. So I can remove those from the equation. If there's any problems, I can focus on what's left, right? Is there potentially a compatibility issue with the RAM, even though it's supposedly Ryzen compatible? It's possible. But if we have a problem and the board doesn't work right, and I'm using all quality components that I know have worked before, except the RAM is brand new, I likely can conclude I have a bad motherboard. It's likely not the CPU. And then I have to decide, is it worth sending in for an RMA? And if it is, I have to describe to the technical department what the problem is, which I won't know until I do all this work. That's why sometimes it's just cheaper to buy a new motherboard and be on. You're not waiting for an RMA number. You don't have to package this up and strip it off, before you send it, and wait 2 weeks minimum before you'll get it back, postponing the completion of your job. You can get another motherboard overnight from Amazon in most cases, and the difference in price might be $100 between when you pay for shipping and all the time and effort and testing and packing it, unpacking it, hoping the one you get works and hasn't been damaged in shipping, putting it all back together. You can take a 2-day job and turn it into a 3-week job very easily to save $100. To each their own. It's your own calculation to figure out what it's worth to you. Now, to put an M.2 in here, let's see. Is there an M.2 in it? Let me remove this heatsink. I don't think there's an M.2 under it, but there could be. So I don't want to add another one and potentially complicate the diagnostic, which will already be complicated enough if there's a problem. And if there's not a problem, then why the heck was this sitting out like this? There's got to be a problem. There must be. There is no M.2 under there. Clearly, I had one under there. The thermal tape has been used. So I've got a few M.2s just laying around here. And these aren't great by any stretch of the imagination, but they'll do for testing. So we'll put one in. Most of these came out of mini PCs. This Kingston says it's a full terabyte. No. Well, this one says it's also a full terabyte. Oh, here's an Intel. Let's use the Intel. Put these Kingstons back over with my little stack. Now these guys, they're stacked up over there because they've not been wiped out and erased. So it's possible when we turn this on, it boots into Windows 10 or 11 that was from whatever system they came out of. Or it's possible it crashes on an attempt to boot up because the drivers are all wrong. Either way, it's fine. It really needs a clean install regardless. Which way did I take this off? This way. Is it that way? I think that's how it was on. Yeah, with an NVMe drive in there, I can clearly see it. I wasn't sure before. I thought I should be able to see it without taking the heatsink off. And I guess what I was seeing was the edge of the thermal tape, and I thought, oh, maybe that's an M.2. But usually, if you hold the motherboard just right, you can look underneath the heatsink and see the circuit board for the M.2 drive. Now I need an on-off switch, so let's grab this one right here. And I'll just plug the power switch side of this onto things. I don't care about the LED. And then we need power to the power supply, and we need keyboard and video. So let's plug video and power. So here's our HDMI right here. And we'll plug that in right there. And then power supply, we've got this power cable right here is the one we need. Flip that switch to on. And of course, behind me, I keep my spare keyboard and mouse for testing. Once again, we're using parts that we have verified in the past work. So if we have any issues, we know it's not a keyboard or mouse problem. We know it's not going to be a power supply problem. I know it's not going to be an M.2 problem because I've used that M.2 before. So that's going to leave us with the potential for RAM. The cooler being inadequate is possible, but I think we'll be okay as long as we don't push it too hard for too long. And then motherboard and CPU. So this minimizes the logic behind this by using parts that we know are good. Is if something's not working, we can eliminate half of our parts from the diagnostic. That speeds the diagnostic up much, much quicker. So let's try this out. Let's go over to our HDMI input. Let me turn this on. You can see the fan is starting to turn. And then let's switch over to the HDMI input. I guess I can just put myself in a corner. Let's see if this thing even posts. I guess that would be a good start. Now, because we've changed the RAM, and because this has been off for a long time, that first power up has to retrain the RAM and likely the CPU again. And this could take from 90 seconds to 3 minutes on our first boot. That's with any new build. Because this has been sitting such a long time, and we've changed out all these components, it's effectively going through the same process as a new build would. I feel like I didn't connect the 12-volt EPS power connector on there. I probably should do that if we want this to work. So I was just looking at the power supply and I saw this cable hanging right here. And I failed to plug this in. Now, this is a very common mistake first-time builders make, is they forget to plug your 12-volt CPU power in or EPS connector. Now, this motherboard has an 8-pin and a 4-pin. We don't have to use the 4-pin. That's for overclockers only. We're not overclocking, so that doesn't impact us. Let's turn this back on. Now that because without this cable, that's exactly what will happen. You just get a black screen. The system will never post, and people think, you know, something's wrong. Shoot, I thought I went full screen there for you guys, and I only went full screen for myself. But I think you got the gist of what I just did. Once again, we're going to wait that full 90 seconds to 3 minutes for the retraining of the RAM and CPU, because it couldn't even have started that retraining without that cable on. So ignore what just happened. Let's see. Chipset fan is not turning. Oh, there it goes. Chipset fan just started to turn right now. So the board is going through something. It's doing something, and we are progressing. Even though it says no signal, doesn't mean the system's locked up or frozen. The training can take a couple minutes, and it's always better to be more patient. Just give it a little extra time. So if we shut this off with a conclusion that it will not do a power on self-test, we can do so confidently. Nothing worse. There's nothing worse than being absolutely convinced you've got a bad motherboard, and you go through the whole RMA process, and the manufacturer sends you back the exact same board 2 weeks later, minus your expense and minus your waiting, and they go, we can't replicate any problem with this board. And all you did was waste your time and your money and postpone the finalization of your build. So you want to be absolutely certain, if you're going to go through that process and spend that money and spend that time, that you have tried everything possible, including being patient. Now, by now, this should have done something. So, what should our next step be? At this point, we don't know if we have a RAM problem, a CPU problem, or a motherboard problem. That's pretty much all we have to diagnose. Now, to test the CPU, you would need a spare CPU to pop in there and see if the board behaves differently. Most people don't have a spare CPU laying around. This is where taking it to a shop would be advantageous because it may cost you less and get the system back in time than you continuing to futz around with it, tinkering, trying to figure it out. That can get very frustrating to the point where you want to throw it out the window and drive over it with the car, and it's no longer repairable. So you're not helping yourself in that situation at all. I'm going to try one other thing here. I'm going to turn this off. And I want to move the CPU fan to the other header. It's disappointing to me that ASUS designed it with 3 headers that are all black. Typically, the CPU fan header will be a different color. And ASUS on this motherboard design has not made this clear. That's very unusual. I don't know why they remove that clarity, but having the CPU fan plugged into the wrong header can also cause the exact same symptom of a no signal situation. Sometimes the system will boot regardless. Sometimes the system will say no CPU fan detected when there was one, or there is one. I've got a diagnostic LED here that's just turned, it went amber, and then it went green. No, it went amber, then it went red, and now it's blue. Now it goes amber again. So you can see the board is doing something. Now it's red. Now it's blue again, or white. LEDs are so bright, the white looks blue oftentimes. Now there's a light to the right, my right, that just turned on and is green. The CPU fan speed has changed, which suggests to me the system is doing something. It certainly looks like it wants to boot from the diagnostic LEDs. But because each motherboard maker, and even between models of this, between different models of motherboards from the same manufacturer, the LEDs that they show are not always the same. Another thing that can keep a system from booting, and especially a system that's been left off for a long time, is the BIOS battery, the CMOS battery, that little 2032 battery. The 2032 battery, as we learned from Mike's unboxing and reviews, it's called a 2032 because it's 20 millimeters wide and 3.2 millimeters thick. 2032. Just like an M.2 drive is a 2280, it's 22 millimeters wide, 80 millimeters long. In any event, this is clearly not booting. We've been patient. We're going to go ahead and shut this off. The next thing I want to do, let me go full screen on camera 1 for you guys instead of just for myself this time. And we want to see these LEDs on the board turn off. That usually takes a few seconds after we cut power because there are capacitors on the board that need to drain. And doing any work could shock the components. It's not going to hurt you, but it could damage sensitive components like RAM if you were, or video card, popping that in and out before the board is completely drained. That's why I always recommend you unplug the system. However, one of the problems, you know what I think the problem is? And I think Chris Garrett, I've just seen it here from Chris Garrett, that the CPU has no graphics built in. I think he's correct. And one of the reasons this board may have been pulled out of a system was because I didn't have any graphics cards to sell. Or that the person who wanted to buy it wanted to offer me 1/10 of what the graphics card was worth. So I think Chris Garrett is correct there, and I think that is the problem. So let me grab a video card. I don't think that power supply has a video card power cable on it. I should have the cables for that somewhere. Let's take a look over here in my inventory and see if I have a graphics card I can use that doesn't take a power cable. Oh, we got something here. Oh, this might work just fine. I keep some old video cards around for just such an occasion. And again, this is where we run into the problem where you're building a computer for $400 or $500, let's say $600 when this was brand new. And the person says, I want to buy that. And you're like, okay, I got to pull the graphics card out of it, but you're going to have to provide your own graphics card. And then, oh, I don't want to buy it. Well, the graphics card is worth as much as the computer is, right? I probably had a 3080 in there, a 3070 or something. And at that time it was probably around $600. So if you want to buy the graphics card in the system, it's $1,200. Oh no, I don't have $1,200. I thought you were selling this for $600. So anyway, I keep these old graphics cards around that nobody wants. The GT740. This doesn't even have a full-size HDMI. It's got a micro HDMI up there, which is hard to get an adapter into. There's that limited space. But we can plug this in. And this doesn't, oh, take it back. There is a power connector on this. What did I do with... Somewhere I've got the power connectors for this, but I can't remember. Oh, they're down here. Okay, never mind. I found the power cables are in a purple bag. I knew I wouldn't have separated it too far. Again, that's the problem with these modular power supplies, is you've got to make sure you're using the right cables and that you even know where they are. What is this? Oh, I'm not using that. What else do I have I can use? I know I have some other testing graphics cards that are low end that don't take power. I just don't know what I did with them. They're somewhere here. I thought I had this organized. I thought I had all of my... Well, I'll tell you what. Just to keep things simple, I have this really cheap old graphics card, but the benefit is it has a full-size HDMI on it, and obviously does not require any power. The PCI Express slot will deliver 75 watts. So as long as you have a graphics card that takes 75 or less watts, you don't need to provide power to it. How do you know? Whether or not the video card has a power connector will tell you that it's not going to get enough from the slot. Otherwise, it wouldn't have the connector. So if it's got a connector, it's not an option to connect power. If it has a power connector for an external power supply, you have to use it. If it doesn't, obviously, I think that speaks for itself. So let me plug the graphics video card, rather, the HDMI cable into this card. Maybe that's all the system was sitting, was just, maybe somebody said, hey, you know, I want to buy the system. They wanted the storage and the RAM. They wanted that config. And they were going to eventually put a GPU in it, but they needed something for now. Obviously, they needed to know they were buying was working. And I can't show them that it works without a graphics card. So what I probably did is pulled this board out and put a different board with a different AMD CPU in it. I can't remember. I'm trying to make sense of it all, but I bet you it works now. Yeah, I think Chris Garrett nailed it. Let's see what happens with a video card in it. Put myself back in the corner. the CPU fan ramped up and then calmed back down. That's usually a good sign. My diagnostic LED just went white towards me. Fan just cranked up again. It's doing something. I mean, it looks happy. LED just went amber and the fan slowed down. Still doing something, still processing. LED just went red, just went off. Now it just went white. The fan went back up and now we've got a boot. There it is. There it is. That's what I'm talking about. All right, now let me go full screen over here so I can see that as well as you can at home. Detected devices, the Intel SSD, keyboard, the mouse, 16 gigs of RAM. Is that all this was? Was it 16 gig, not a 32? Or are we only seeing one stick? No, this is 8 gigs times 2 sticks. So that's 16. It's detecting the RAM properly. Press F1 to run setup. There's probably a BIOS update to this board. It's been sitting a long time. Let's find out. We're using BIOS version 5003 according to that. X570 Pro. So let's go to the ASUS website. In fact, let's just go to Google and we'll just type in X570 Pro ASUS BIOS. Now, let me share the screen with you so you can watch what I'm doing. Let's get rid of me and let's get rid of the window capture. I mean the HDMI input, so we can turn on window capture. And this is my search. And the very first link using Google, the very first link is coming from ASUS here. Let's click on that. It says BIOS and firmware. That's exactly where I want it to be. It shows 5013. To make sure I'm on the right motherboard, let's make sure there is a 5003. There it is right there. So that confirms the BIOS I have now and that this is the newer version. Let's download that, save that, and extract it to a blank flash drive, which I have here in the drawer. So let's, let me see, how do I do this? I need to come back to OBS, back over to camera 1. Let's go full screen on camera 1. Camera 1. Okay, so that downloaded file, I'm going to extract the contents of that downloaded zip file that's in my downloads directory. Simply double click on it. At the top of the window, click extract all, and then hit the extract button. That's going to open a folder with the contents of the file expanded and extracted into that folder. I'm going to select the .cap file, or the largest file in that folder that it just expanded into. And I'm going to hit the copy button and I'm going to paste it onto a blank flash drive. This flash drive is only an 8 gig flash drive. These are from a company called Sam Data. They're like $2 a piece in a package that contains 10. We can use any USB port for this. And let's paste that. It'll take a minute for that USB to show up here. I plugged it into the wrong system. It's not ready to plug in there yet. I have to copy the file onto it first. So let me take this out. Getting ahead of myself. Let's plug it into the streamer back here because that's where I've downloaded the file, is on the streamer. So let's plug that in. And then on my side, what I will see, you guys won't see it, is I'll see that flash drive window open and it's a blank flash drive, so I won't accidentally select the wrong file. And I'll just hit the paste icon and paste that small BIOS file to it. Now, given this is not a fast flash drive, it'll take a few seconds longer than with a more expensive flash drive, but the BIOS flashing process won't be any faster. regardless of how fast your flash drive is. So don't waste any money on an expensive flash drive for this process. These are so inexpensive. If they fail, they're not worth the price of postage to return for warranty. Just chuck it, go get another one. This is where we are with technology now. For better or for worse, things are more like batteries than ever before. Battery dies, you don't send it in for warranty, unless it's a really expensive battery. Okay, so I see what's happened here. My tablet has frozen up. The chat is not moving, and I did not see Chris Garrett's comment. I don't know how long his comment had been there. I was not aware this chat room wasn't updating. Okay, so Chris says, don't give me credit. Someone watched and told me on Facebook Messenger. Yeah, well, it occurred to me as I was saying, I think this needs a graphics card, and I looked up and I saw that the chat room here was different from the chat room over here, and I didn't want to come across like, oh, I figured this out on my own. I'd rather give you the credit because it had been there and I hadn't seen it. But that's, you know, that pride and ego stuff doesn't matter. The bottom line is I understand now why this was set aside. I still don't know why it was stripped, but it was, it requires the graphics card. And with the price of graphics cards, it made the system unsellable. So my option is to, you know, buy a different AMD CPU that has built-in graphics and just chuck the 3900X. Because it's probably cheaper to do that than to buy a graphics card. Think about that. That's the times we're living in. So let me go back over to my OBS. Let's go back to our HDMI input. And let's start the BIOS flash. It should have recognized the flash drive by now. Somewhere we have, let's do what? Advanced mode, is it? Tool. ASUS Easy Flash, yes. And we have a number of drives here. We'll just click on each one, I guess. That's the Intel drive. That's the Intel drive. That is the flash drive right there. Yeah, that makes sense. 7,663 megs is rounded up 8 gigs. That's the BIOS flash drive. That's why my BIOS flash drive is empty with only one file on it. Makes it very easy to find in a search like this. If this was buried amongst other files, I'd be looking more carefully. Is it in this one? Is it in this one? So this makes that process foolproof and quick. Here we go. We'll let it read the file. It says, do you really want to update this? Yes, I do. Now, I don't know what the BIOS update is for, but whatever it's for, I don't want to have to deal with the symptoms and the diagnostic that this BIOS update addresses. So by putting the latest BIOS update on, I'm assuring myself or any future owner that they will never suffer whatever the problem is that required this BIOS update. So this is preventive, and it's something a customer will never realize has benefited them, if it benefits them. It won't hurt them at all. The only important thing is that we leave this alone while it's updating. We don't want to lose power. We don't want to interrupt it. Apart from that, just leave it alone, give it a couple minutes, and these BIOS updates they're going to be successful 100% of the time, unless you do something to interrupt it or you lose power. That's it. And if you live in an area where you lose power frequently, having a battery backup at all times is probably a good idea just for everyday use, not just for updating a BIOS for a couple minutes. So while we're waiting, I'm going to go look in the chat room here and see what I've been missing. Mara says she's added a link to the board and CPU to the video notes. Thank you, Mara. PC Fishing is now a member of the channel for 26 months. Right on. Yeah, Blinsky saying hello from southwestern Pennsylvania. Jose Lopez saying hello. Bajan Guy says, don't some motherboards come with graphics? So back in the day, the graphics were part of the motherboard, like the sound card and the network card are commonly today. But sometime in the 2000s, they moved the graphics onto the CPU chip and off of the motherboard. So all the motherboard is providing is the plug, the HDMI or DisplayPort or DVI or VGA plug. The opposite end of the plug on the motherboard goes to the CPU socket versus going to a graphics card chip on the motherboard like they used to do in the 90s. So no modern motherboard in the last 20 years has come with a built-in video chip on the board that is now either built into the CPU or you must provide one yourself, as we've demonstrated in today's video. But it can be confusing if you were buying a motherboard in the 90s and it had a VIA graphics card in it or an S3 graphics card. These were very common, and some motherboards had that graphics built in and some didn't. Today, the motherboards either have the HDMI plugs or they don't. If you look at the MSI Meg motherboards that are like $600 a piece, they often do not have the HDMI or DisplayPort or video outputs on the board. So what that tells you is that if you buy a CPU that has built-in graphics, there's no way for you to attach to them in that motherboard. It's not possible because the manufacturer of that board said, this is a board designed for gamers and workstations, not for home users looking for onboard graphics. People looking for onboard graphics would not spend $600 on a motherboard. Therefore, they concluded, why add the HDMI port and display port to the board, which is foolish because it doesn't cost that much. You're already spending $600. I think it's just a sneaky way for MSI to make a few extra bucks on the board that they're already overcharging for, in my opinion. And that forces you to use a discrete graphics card, regardless if your CPU has graphics or not built into it. So the motherboard has to provide the ports, and the CPU has to provide the graphics, or you need to go and buy a discrete graphics card that you plug in, which of course adds to the overall cost of your build, and they're expensive. I mean, unless you're buying something old. Like the graphics card we're using today is very, very old. Now you'll notice the system says no signal, and it's been saying that for a while. This is a normal part of the process, and I cannot urge you enough to leave it alone. If it sits this way for more than 10 minutes, we've got a problem. But 10 minutes can feel like a half an hour if you're sitting there staring at it. So don't try and fix it. It's not broken. At least not until 10 minutes has passed first. Then you can make an attempt to fix it. Unless, of course, you just want to brick your motherboard, in which case, help yourself. So leave it alone. It could take upwards of 10 minutes. Now, normally it won't take as long as 10 minutes. But that, again, patience is free. And we want to be absolutely certain before we were to interrupt this BIOS, potentially interrupt it. It may be doing something very important right now, or it could be locked up. But it's too early to know. So that's why we're just going to sit patiently and let's assume it's doing something important right now and be patient and give it the space to complete it successfully. It is highly unlikely that any interruption to this process will be beneficial to you in any way. While we're staring at this no signal screen, I'll put camera 1 back on and put myself back in a corner here, keep it together. But I want you to know I'm still here, and we definitely want to make sure that we give this enough time before we come to any conclusions. And while I'm waiting, I'm going to grab another cold Gatorade. I barely touched this one. I do get a bit of anxiety, just as I'm sure many of you do, when these things take a long time. But we've only missed, it's only been like 90 seconds. I know it feels like a long time, but relax. When we do BIOS flashback, that can often take 10 minutes. When we do the BIOS update this way, it usually only takes about 5 or 6 minutes at the most. So I feel like it should have done something by now. Believe me, I feel like something's wrong, but I don't want to let that anxiety mess with reality. I want to confirm reality because it's not making anything any worse by waiting. If there's something locked up, it'll still be locked up in 8 more minutes. And if it is actually doing something and our impatience interrupts it, we may brick the board. Al Perez became a member. Right on. Thank you, Al. Bajan Guy wants to know if anything's going on with the status LEDs. I have a single green LED I'm looking at, so nothing indicating a problem. Bill wants to know, what do you do if it's locked up? Well, Bill, your choices aren't really, I don't know what choices you think you have. If it's locked up, you have no choice but to cut power to the motherboard. With a board out and in the open like this, the safest way to do that is to reach over your power supply and to flip the switch off. You don't have a choice. There is no other option. Then when you switch it, give it a minute, switch it back on, and hopefully it repairs itself, like it just fires back up. That, you know, maybe it suffered some kind of a fluke or a glitch. On the other hand, if you flip the power supply off, let the board sit for a minute, turn it back on, and it still continues what it's doing right now, you have likely installed the wrong BIOS or interrupted the BIOS from completing. The BIOS was absolutely the right BIOS for this board. I'm very sure of that, given that we had the same version 5003 to 5013. Also, the board should not let you flash the wrong BIOS. And as long as the BIOS update was not interrupted, in most cases, this never happens. But if it does happen, in most cases, simply turning the machine off and back on again resolves whatever the hangup is. Now, it's been about 5 minutes. If we were doing a BIOS flashback, it still could be in the middle of processing. But doing the BIOS through a flash drive, through the way I've just demonstrated, never, ever takes this long. Never. I will tell you guys to wait twice as long. Okay, but for me personally, I am convinced we're frozen up here. There could be a reason for that, in the sense that, for example, I've seen motherboards not turn on when certain flash drives are plugged into them. So because we did not turn the system on with the flash drive, we don't know if that flash drive has some sort of compatibility issue that would prevent this board from booting. Remember, the system was already on and in the BIOS when I plugged the flash drive in. We were able to read the flash drive correctly. If you ever have booting problems with your computer, whether it's booting really slow or it's not booting at all, unplug any flash drives or external hard drives. You should not be booting with these things plugged in, because this can happen. And that's why if we shut the power supply off, which is still a little bit early, but I'm very convinced that that's not going to get us anywhere. If we pull the flash drive out right now, oh, I thought I was over here. If we pull this flash drive out right now, it may not be done flashing. So the first thing I want to do is just turn the machine back on with the flash drive installed, just in case there's a second part to the flash. We've seen this before on other BIOS flashes. It's not that common, but it does happen. So we're going to turn this back on. And now if we get the same symptom, in other words, if it's not going to post, then I'm going to assume this flash drive is something's incompatible, like it's trying to boot from the flash drive. I don't know. And in that case, you have to wait for it to time out, and that could be a while. Let's give it a second here and see if we get any further along. If not, we're going to shut it back down, take the flash drive out, turn it back on one more time, just to see if it's the flash drive that's causing it. The cheaper the flash drive is, the more likely you'll run into a scenario of an incompatibility. If we're using a name brand like SanDisk, this will almost never happen unless the board is really old. And then you're using a really brand new flash drive. There could be a compatibility issue there. So, I've got a green LED. We're right back to where we were. I don't see any progress. That doesn't mean nothing's happening. I want to advise you as a home user to be patient. I'm going to advise me as someone doing a live educational video to get on with it. So I'm going to cut this back off, and I'm going to pull the flash drive out. We'll just set it right over there. And then we're going to turn this back on. Now you see I didn't leave it off long enough, because the minute I flipped the switch back on the power supply, the system started booting without me hitting the power button. And that tells me I was impatient and I didn't let all the power drain out of the board. That doesn't mean it's not going to work. It's just not the right way to do it. Patience is always recommended when working on computers, unless you want it to take longer and you want to work harder and get yourself frustrated. So, ask me how I know. I'm going to go ahead and shut this off properly now. And by shutting it off properly, we want to wait for the RGB LEDs on the board to go out. We want the fan to stop spinning. That'll likely happen first. And then in about 30 seconds, the onboard RGB LED should suck up whatever left of the capacitor power and drain them. Now we can flip this back on. And when I flip it back on, it should not auto start. Perfect. Now I hit the button. So if you ever experience that, where you flip your power supply off and then you flip it back on again and the system starts without you hitting the power button, that's because you weren't patient enough between the power off and the power on. So I'm not seeing any difference in the board behavior right now, but that's not necessarily indicative of a bad BIOS flash. The BIOS flash was the last thing we did, right? So it'd be easy to conclude wrong BIOS would cause this. But by today's standards, it's almost impossible to flash the wrong BIOS. Sometimes motherboard manufacturers, if they're irresponsible, will use the same BIOS version on a similar board that's a different revision, or maybe one has Wi-Fi. And then let's say you have a board that has Wi-Fi and it accepts the BIOS from the same board that doesn't have Wi-Fi and follows the same BIOS numbers. That's a bad manufacturer that does that. And if they do allow that, then that means that the BIOS should still work. It just means maybe the option for Wi-Fi won't be there. This board does not have Wi-Fi, and we know that it worked. We know that we posted, and the only change we've made is to the BIOS. So it gets me wondering, is it possible that the BIOS update was for a different revision of board and that ASUS named it the same? Shouldn't be possible. But this is very unusual. This may be the only time we've ever seen a system not boot after a BIOS update ever in the history of the channel. That's how rare this is. But it doesn't mean we've got a bad BIOS update. So, and this is where the dilemma falls, and this is where patience comes into it, where your emotion might be anger, panic. Did I just brick my board? And what you need is to be calm and logical and think this through. So I have still a single green LED facing me. And so by now we should have posted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this back off again and continue my diagnostic forward. I've got to tell you, when things go sideways, well, you might find that frustrating and angering. it's far more interesting to anybody watching. This makes for a far better video than if everything went as expected. Because the problem is, when you do video edits like most video channels do, they cut all this stuff out. And that's all well and good if you're in a hurry and you want to watch a video quickly. And then you go to replicate it and you get a different result. But they never showed you what to do with that different result. They never even, they might have said, oh, well, you know, this is how it's done and it should work. Let me show you. And then they don't show you what happens if it doesn't work. And then what happens when you do it, it doesn't work. You go, now what do I do? That's the problem with video editing. And the problem with some of the viewers, they want those video edits. They go, I don't want to watch a 2-hour video. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't want to go to school 8 hours a day for the first 12 years of my life. And yet they forced me to, and darn it, they made me smarter. I didn't want to be any smarter. Turns out I did want to be smarter. I just didn't want to spend all the time in school. There's a sacrifice you've got to make, and the benefits or the consequences of whether or not you choose that sacrifice will immediately be to you and only your benefit or only your consequence. If you don't have time to learn, you're on the wrong channel. Polished and edited videos may be highly entertaining and you might walk away from it thinking you've learned something, but when they're edited, you don't know what they haven't shown you. You don't know what was left on the cutting room floor and why. And if it doesn't work the way they showed it, maybe you should have watched a longer video. Or maybe you shouldn't even have done it if you're in that kind of a hurry and you don't have time to learn. Maybe just hire somebody to take care of it for you. Sometimes I get comments from viewers who insist they want me to make commercials. I mean, that's not exactly what they say, but your video is too long. Okay, well, I think you're looking for commercials. Can you imagine a 7-year-old saying, school is too long? We go too often, and every day we're there too long. No, no, you're not. All right, so I want to check the CMOS battery. I want to pop the CMOS battery for 2 reasons. One, I want to clear the BIOS out just in case something in the BIOS got corrupted. This will give it a chance to reset. While it's doing that, it gives me an opportunity to bide my time and let that reset take place while I check the voltage on that battery. So I was mentioning the battery earlier before it occurred to me about the whole video card situation. And thought, well, this doesn't matter anymore, right? We've moved on, but now we're right back to where we were. So let me get that battery out. Now, a board that remains unplugged is going to be draining from this battery. As long as your system is plugged in and the power supply is on, even if the system's off, that provides enough power to the board that this battery is not needed. The only time this battery is in use is when the power is cut. And if the power is cut for months at a time, this battery gets drained quite a bit. So let's check what the status of this battery is. I can tell from the brand name, the KTS, this is the battery the motherboard came with. These batteries you can usually get 5 years out of under normal use, but if the board remains unused and not plugged in, you maybe only get a year out of them. So with my battery tester, we'll just put that down there. Well, that just looks completely dead. I mean, solid, nothing, won't even light up the battery tester. And then you think, well, is the battery tester working? Well, we'll grab a different 2032 battery. I've got a brand new Duracell right here, because I just did this the other day. Same battery tester, no tricks up my sleeve. And look at that, 3.15. That's a brand new battery. Let me just check this other one real quick. This is the stock battery. Like I said, leaving the board unplugged like that will drain it awfully quick. But let me make sure I seated it well. I mean, that thing is as dead gets. That is now degraded to skeleton form. So there's not, that's how much it drains the BIOS battery from leaving a board unplugged. So again, if the board was plugged in but wasn't used, that battery would not have drained that quickly. The batteries are not intended to provide the date and time updates to the board for months and months or even a year or more. So with a new battery in it, I'm just kind of curious if that has been the source of our issue this whole time, which I was heading in that direction anyway. But let's go back to the HDMI input here where it says no signal. And my blue LED just turned to amber, and now it's still amber. It's doing something. Now it's red. Now it's blue. And the fan is really, really cranked up on the CPU. Now it's amber again, and the fan is slowed down. Still amber, now red again. Now it's blue. And all the panic and anxiety and fear that you've bricked your motherboard with the wrong BIOS, how do you feel now? You might feel relieved. You might think, oh, wow. Oh, this is why I don't update my BIOS. No, no, no. This has nothing to do with the BIOS update. This has to do with having a bad battery. If you've left a system unplugged for months at a time, there's a great likelihood that your battery is dead. It's $3, maybe $6, depending on where you buy one of these 2032s. And you get a package of them at Costco for about $2 each, right? Out of a package of like 16 or however many they've got in there. So it's like 30, 40 bucks, but they'll last a long time. And their shelf life is 10 years. So let's go F1 to run setup. We should see the BIOS version 5013 now. And in fact, we do right there. So our BIOS update was successful. So there is a combination of two problems in the real world that most channels would have edited out that, in my opinion, are far more valuable than any information that channel provided in a video. This is what channels leave out. Now, you can see here, I've got the CPU fan plugged into the CPU optional fan. So I think I had the CPU fan plugged in the right header the first time, because this is the one we want to see turn. But I don't want to do that while the system's on. So let's just load our defaults here. So this default F5, load optimize defaults, and then save and exit. Okay. And then once again, the post shouldn't take anywhere near as long now that we've gotten through that nail biting sequence. And you know, in the real world, if you're to do your own tech work, it's not going to be edited. In the real world, if you work for other people and they're hiring you to do work for them, tech work, it's not going to be edited. This is real life. It's sometimes filled with drama and anxiety. A lot of it is occurring only in our heads. It's not actually happening in reality. It's how we're choosing to react to it. They say that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you voluntarily choose to respond. As you see, I choose to respond in a calm and collected manner, even though my brain is saying, oh no, oh no, oh no. There's this other side of my brain that's saying, relax, it's too early for oh no. We can fix anything. Let's not jump to conclusions. Let's give this a fair diagnostic shot. Now, when we reset this back to the standards, right? The BIOS, let me go back to camera one here. When I reset the BIOS back to the standards, it should post. The fact that it hasn't posted yet, and we're kind of right back where we started from, once again, we go back to, oh no, oh no. But again, and I can't stress this enough, it's still, I'm not convinced we've resolved all the issues. All right, so far we've resolved the issue of needing a GPU. We've resolved the issue that we have a bad CMOS battery. These are factual, undeniable problems. And as long as those problems remained unresolved, we were never going to get this running. And sometimes you solve one problem to expose another problem behind it. Most boards, you're not going to have a combination of this many problems in most repair scenarios. So I'm still not convinced the issue isn't with me just not seeing it. So let me go back and yeah, we're still at a no post screen. Let me bring this down and over here, and let's cut the power to it again. So I have the flash drive removed. That's no longer, you know, a possibility of being a conflict. I'm not sure it ever was, but by removing it, it's not even an option on the table. We've made no other changes other than changing the battery and adding the graphics card to this board. We know the BIOS update's just fine. Sometimes you just have to turn it off and back on again. And I mean, cut the power. Sometimes that's all you have to do. Most times. If this is something that's happening frequently, where your system is constantly having issues starting up, you could simply not turn it off, right? If you can get it to boot once, leave it on. On the other hand, if it bothers you that, you know, hey, I should be able to turn it off and on without a problem, how much time and how much money do you want to spend in resolving that? And at the end of the day, you decide accordingly, but you do have options. Now, the fact that we got it to boot up and now doesn't want to post anymore, you can imagine how frustrating that can be. And sometimes you need to walk away from something. You need to say, okay, I've already fixed 2 individual issues. Not having a GPU was a Carey issue. That was me not understanding the graphics card is not built into the CPU. Having a bad BIOS battery should be expected. If a board's been sitting for a few months, it's likely the battery's bad. Even if it's a brand new system you bought, but it's like 3 years, say you went on Amazon and they have a 3-year-old motherboard in inventory, it is highly likely the battery on that brand new motherboard, because it's been sitting for 3 years in the box, unsold, has already gone bad. They're not designed for that. Now, another possibility is the fact that I'm using the cheapest graphics card I've got laying around, which let's face it, these old parts are likely your first source of your problems. If you go to Google and you type in PC repair Reddit, you're going to see over and over and over again, you're going to see people who are asking for help who have old hardware. You will see more people asking for help who have old, outdated hardware than any other category of repair. The second most common category will be laptops. So old technology is going to create all kinds of problems, and they'll never stop. I don't want to throw this away. It still works. No, it doesn't. And it's a nightmare to fix it. Parts are hard to get, and even when it's fixed, it's still obsolete. So why waste your time? That's your clue. Time to get a new machine. Laptops are prone to damage and spills, and sometimes people open them up to do something and they break them because they're very delicate and they're a little ham-fisted. So you're going to see, number one, the most common request for help is coming from somebody with old hardware. Number two is coming from someone with a laptop. As you can imagine, an old laptop, very common people asking for help with old laptops. They just aren't worth fixing. But look, if somebody wants to jump on Reddit and waste their time, in my opinion, you got nothing else better to do, you're wasting your time, you're going to help some stranger on the internet, you're effectively enabling somebody to continue using something they should have stopped using, and that's a big sign from above. It's telling them to stop using it, and you're going to help them get that thing back up and running so they can remain in danger online. I just don't see any bright side to this. If you fall into the category of having old hardware, know to expect you're going to have problems. The older the hardware gets, the more problems you're going to have with it. Same is true with everything in life. Older cars, older people, as we age, we start having problems. I got problems I never had as a teenager. It's just normal, everyday wear and tear. And Lack of use. If something is set aside, this is not a toaster. It's not an appliance. These things, if they're left aside for a long period of time and you pull it out of a closet and blow the dust off of it, there's a good chance it's not usable anymore. It's like old stale moldy bread. It's time to throw it away. You're past the crouton stage. But to each their own, I just want you to have proper expectations. Nobody would hire me to fix a computer for $300 when a new computer can be purchased for $300. And the new computer will have a warranty. It'll be faster. It'll be up to date. It'll have some free support for a certain period of time. And the fix will be instantaneous. You don't have to wait for me to schedule you, come out, and worry if the fix is going to be permanent or not, right? You can get a faster solution for the same or less money than fixing something old you already have. Even if you fix the old thing you already have, it's likely going to break again far sooner than something new will. Statistically speaking, there's always exceptions. Now, with that being said, let me switch that video card out because I think that's my problem. So let me see what else I have back here. Somewhere here I have something. I'd swear, oh, you know what? Sold it. I said, I'm not using these. Let's do this. You know, I don't even think I've ever taken this out of the box. This will go good with an AMD motherboard and CPU. Intel Arc A380. It's one of the cheaper Intel Arc, but also smaller and requires less power. Yeah, I've never even taken it out of the static bag. Look at that, it's brand new. This will be, and the reason I purchased it, it'll be great for testing. Yeah, this bag has never ever been opened. So hopefully they didn't send me a bad one because I'm well past my return period on this. We have some plastic that has to be removed. Gary Tatum says, I feel like I'm past the crouton stage. Yeah, what can you do? I know what you mean. So I think here's the logic. I think at one point I decided I was going to sell my old graphics card that I was using for testing. It was like a 1080 or a 1070 because it still had value. And I thought, you know what? If I got somebody who wants to buy it, let them buy it because it's older, it's used. I don't know how much life it's got left in it. And let me get one of these new Intel Arc because at the time this had just come out, the A380, relatively affordable. And that'll be my new graphics testing or card for graphics testing. And I just haven't needed a card for testing until now. I've always used the older one. We've got a bunch of dust covers here. We'll remove one for HDMI. That is not HDMI, that's DisplayPort. That is DisplayPort. That is DisplayPort. Okay, let's go for the top one. HDMI. The other thing these are good for, and this is made by ASRock, the Intel Arc A380, is if you've got a customer who doesn't want a game, but they want to have 4 monitors attached, you could add this graphics card far cheaper than many other graphics cards, and certainly far cheaper than building them a new machine. You know, we've certainly seen a number of mini PCs today that you can run 4 monitors directly out of. But a lot of older desktops, you only get 2 or 3. But with a modern day graphics card that's affordable like this, it's a cheap way to, a less expensive way to get that customer with 4 monitors. That's a lot of people in finance that want 4 monitors where they're watching market trading and have multiple screens open. And so for them, this is pennies compared to a whole new machine. So the power supply is off, right? We want to make sure that's off. I'll unplug my HDMI cable and let's take this GPU out of here because I think I think this is causing me some issues. If you want to grab the cheapest thing you've got laying around because you want to justify not replacing something with something new, and you want to put that old thing you've got laying around in your new computer that you are relying on and you're going to have anxiety over, don't go cheap on the parts. Now, if you've got an old piece of crap computer laying around that you just toy with as a novelty, then throw your old piece of crap parts in it. That's fine. But if you put old piece of crap parts into a new computer that you rely on, you're just asking for trouble. You'd be much better off with as cheap as parts are today. Just get new parts with a warranty in case there's any issues. You could send them back. You get peace of mind, get it done, and move on with your life. Trying to keep this old stuff alive is always going to bite you on the butt. Now, I don't know that this is going to work. May not. But if I ever run into a customer who's got all new components, but something plugged into the board is old, an old flash drive, an old USB storage drive, an old printer, an old video card, old RAM, an old mechanical hard drive, guess what the first thing is I'm going to disconnect in my diagnostic? And how often do you think that's the fix? Often enough for me to talk about it. Now, this video card will need some power. So the reason I use this other video card is I didn't want to have to pull out a power cable. And as you can see, perhaps the length of time and effort it would have taken me to do that is less than the length of time and effort it's taken me to come to this conclusion. Maybe. We'll find out here in a minute. But it is so common to see older components being the issue. I'll be surprised if this doesn't fix it. But that's okay. I've been surprised before. And that's the benefit of these live videos. That's the real secret to my content, is to show reality without edits. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do believe this is going to fix it. My beliefs don't change reality, however. So the only way we really know is to assume nothing and to test. Test and verify. Based on that information, we decide how to move forward. Until we have that information, all we have is conjecture and imagination, and that doesn't get a lot done. So let's turn this back on. Hit the power button and switch over to our HDMI input once again. Let's see if we get lucky. LEDs are changing on the board. I got the blue. Oh, wait, look. What a shocker. I am so surprised. I had no idea that would fix the problem. But wait, I haven't shut it off and back on again. So let's repeat F1 to set up. Right? And what did I do last time? I loaded the BIOS defaults, right? So I went to, F5 to load the defaults, even though they should be set from last time, and F10 to save and exit. Click OK. And this is where it wouldn't reboot before, right? Will that happen again? Are we back in a loop? Or have we resolved it by simply stopping the usage of old crappy parts? I don't know. Place your bets. What do you think is going to happen? What a shock! How many of you are surprised? Can you imagine somebody that has 30 plus years of experience has seen this before time and time again? That doesn't always mean it's going to be the solution to a particular symptom, but it's common. And if it's common, that's where you want to start. Now that CPU fan error, let's talk about that. Let's switch back over to camera 1, because that deserves discussion as well. We'll flip this back off. The CPU fan headers on this board, there are 3 of them. There are 2 at the edge of the board and 1 behind, so it looks like a triangle. And the one behind is closest to the CPU cooler. The board only tells us what two of them are, and it doesn't specify which two. Normally, they write it on the board in the order that they're in. So if they're side by side, somewhere on the board where there's room, they'll write down what the one on the right is on the right and what the one on the left is on the left. Even if they're right next to each other, one says CPU fan 1 and one says all-in-one pump, and it's written 3 inches away from the plugs. They're written in the same order that the plugs are in. But what happens when you have a third plug and there's no apparent writing as to what it is? Which ones are they referring to? So when we weren't booting, I started to move this plug thinking maybe it's not detecting the CPU fan. When initially I had plugged it in the correct place, and this is where, again, haste makes waste. I could have opened up a PDF file and just read it. Which plug is it? But I thought it'll come up and it'll tell me if it's not right. And it did. It just took us a while to get there. So now by me moving that over, just one plug, let's turn this back on, and we should no longer get a CPU error. So let's go back over to our, well, first let's turn it on. So you'll see it's all starting to fire up. And now let's go back to our HDMI input. And it should post again without a problem. There it is. We should no longer get a CPU fan error. Don't worry about that no signal. It's probably going to try and boot from that Intel drive right now. And I don't know if that'll work or not, quite frankly. I would always do a clean install. Yeah, see, it looks like it's booting to Windows 10. I have no idea what's on this drive. It likely came out of a mini PC or, I don't know, some other custom build, Intel build maybe. So we don't have any of the right drivers. Now, because this booted, that doesn't mean that you can take the drive out of your machine and move it into a new machine and think all your software is going to work. Any activations we had on any software are lost now because the hardware has changed. And if the hardware changes and you think you can just copy your software to other hardware, that's like taking the license plate off of your old car and putting it on your new car. It is completely illegal unless you pay for that license. The license was for the car you put it on, just the one car only. And if you were to move that license to a different car, that is theft, unless you pay for it and get approval from your state here in the United States. In most cases, when you get a new car, you get a new license. Either way, you have to pay for moving your old license or buying a new license, and software is the same. If we had Office and all these other applications and we didn't know where the installers were, so we just wanted to move the drive and it boots into Windows, you're going to have an activation problem on any software that acknowledges that you just pirated their software. That's what you've done. You have pirated it. And if you don't agree with that, don't buy their software anymore. Find an alternative. But these are the terms that you agreed to when you clicked accept. This is normal industry-wide standard since the beginning of all software. As far as I can go back, and as far as at least PCs go, that's always the way it's been. It's just they've had a hard time enforcing it before the internet. Regardless of that, I want to do a clean install of Windows 11 on this machine. And the way I'm going to do that, let's go back over to camera one here for a minute. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to grab my Windows 11 USB installer. Now keep in mind, we still have our old BIOS on this flash drive over here, which I just dropped. We're done with this forever, and this can be erased and put back in the drawer for another BIOS update to another board on another day. I always keep this blank and available for that. This is my Windows 11 installation media. That says Windows 10. How many times am I going to do that? At least I noticed it this time. This one is Windows 11. And look, they're both the exact same flash drive. That's why I put labels on them. But yeah, this one's my Windows 11. And I have a video that shows you how to make this completely free and legal directly from Microsoft using the Microsoft Windows Media Creation tool. You can just go to Google, type that in. It's a free utility. Make sure you have a flash drive of 8 gigs or bigger available. And then you create your media tool. We're going to plug that in, preferably to a blue USB port, because that's a fast flash drive, and plugging it into a black USB port negates the whole purpose of that drive being fast. The next thing we want to do is boot to that flash drive. And this is what confuses most people is, well, how do I get it to boot to the flash drive? Very easily. We're going to restart the computer, and we're going to repeatedly hit the delete button to get us into the BIOS. Some motherboards have a boot menu option. If you see that at the bottom of the screen, it might be F12 or it'll say boot menu. That's your menu to temporarily override. So normally the boot order is to boot from the SSD first and the USB second. And the reason why I can plug a USB drive in and have it boot automatically to the USB drive first is when we're using a brand new SSD that is not bootable. So it's not an option until after we put Windows on it. So once Windows is on it, it prioritizes that by default, just BIOS defaults. And you can go into the BIOS and you can change that boot order, but then you'll have to change it back. So the boot override is saying just on this one boot only, I want you to boot from this device. And you tell it which device, in our case, the SanDisk flash drive. Let me show you how that's done. We're going to turn off camera 1 here for a minute. You know what? Let's do it this way. Let's just turn power off. Let's just cut the power, because it doesn't matter if I corrupt this. All right, and then let me put myself in a corner so you can see what I'm doing this whole time, but maybe not that big. I'll put myself right up there. Let's turn this back on, and let's turn this back on. And then as soon as the screen goes blank, as soon as it happens, right there, start pressing delete over and over and over. Delete, 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 delete. It says press delete or F2 to enter setup. I'll keep pressing it. Boom, I got in. It's that easy. It's that easy. Now, once we're in here, let's get rid of camera 1 just one more time so you can see the entire BIOS. We're going to go over to either save and exit or boot. Now, that may be in the advanced section of your BIOS. Okay, sometimes you can change the boot priority here, but this is changing it permanently. I only want to change it temporarily. So let me go full screen because I can't see this as well as you can at home. And down here, it says boot menu F8. The mouse will cooperate. So in the ASUS BIOS, and this will change depending on the manufacturer and the board, you may have to go into advanced mode to find this. But they presented it to us right here, boot menu. Let's click on it. And this is temporary. What they're saying is, on the next boot, what do you want to boot to? And it looks at what's potentially bootable. This is our Intel SSD, and this is the 2 partitions we have. And I'm going to select the first one and press enter. And it automatically restarts the computer. And then it should, this time, prioritize booting to the flash drive. Notice the little flushing toilet circle was a solid line and not a dotted line. The dotted line is Windows 10, the solid line is Windows 11. So we're in the setup already, and all I need to do at this point is go through my normal installation process. You've seen me do countless times before. The only difference is that normally when it asks us where to install, we would say to install to the SSD. That'll say it's unallocated space for the size of SSD, whatever its capacity is. Here, we do everything else the same. I don't have a product key. This will keep the product key from before, as long as we select the right version of Windows. So whether it was Windows 10 Pro or Windows 11 Pro, the same product key works either way and will be reapplied automatically when we reconnect to the internet after our install is complete, unless we selected the wrong version that our product key wasn't for. So if we had a product key for Windows 10 Home and we're trying to put on Windows 11 Pro or Windows 10 Pro, it'll say we don't have a product key for that. But I'm assuming I put a product key in for Windows 10 Pro because it looked like we had Windows 10 on it. I didn't check to see if I activated it. Actually, we never used this SSD in this drive, so that may not apply. I may have to buy a product key. I'll see what happens. Let's go next. Accept the license agreement. Custom, I always choose custom. Now these are the existing partitions on a used drive, and we're going to permanently erase all the data on this drive. Bye-bye. I hope you had backups if any of it was important. Because when I'm done deleting these partitions, that drive is completely wiped clean with no data, no partitions, no formatting. It's all gone now. This is what it looks like when it's brand new and has never before been used. That's the state we want to return it to. And then we click next. And now it's like any other fresh new install of Windows 10 or 11. Whether the system is used or new is irrelevant. We treat it like it's new. We install it like it's new. And that way we follow consistent rules and we have consistent results. Okay, let's bring back camera one. And if you guys have any questions for me, I'll take them now. Otherwise, we just passed the 2-hour mark, and this will be a good time for me to wrap it up. But I'm glad I know what this is now, because that means the next step is I can put it into a case with a power supply and a GPU, and then just move all that to Studio C or sell it to somebody. Because at the start of the show, I didn't know what this was and why it was sitting. And look at all the answers we got. And look at the experience we got from resolving the issues without panic, without frustration or anxiety, or allowing the voices in our head to control our actions. We exercise free will, and we choose to remain calm, collected, and logical. Take the emotion out of it. If you cannot take the emotion out of it, take some time away. Just let it sit or ask somebody for help. There's no harm or shame in that. Whatever you do, don't take your frustration out on the board, or you will take what was fixable and permanently make it trash, unfixable garbage. Your choice, it's your money and it's your parts, but I don't know why you would voluntarily destroy something simply out of your lack of understanding. All right, quickly, let's look through the chat. Jack Kugumes became a supporter. Right on. Thank you, Jack. L. Perez became a supporter. Thank you, Al. Mara has added the Intel Arc A380 graphics card to the video notes. If you're curious what this graphics card is I'm using, remember, always check those video notes for links, and if Mara has updated, you may need to refresh the page to get those updates. Verusian Kalustian with a $2 super chat. He says, believe Marvin's original board before the upgrade. You know, you may be exactly right. This may have come out of the system that Marvin bought from, what was that PC integrator's name? I think they were purchased by another company. Anyway, yeah, we set Marvin up with something much better, and Marvin says it's working great. Last I talked to him a few weeks ago, he's totally happy with his board. Even, what's it been, a year and a half, 2 years later? He's not required any updates or upgrades or repairs. Peter VZ joining us from Amsterdam with a €1 super chat. Thank you, Peter. David Graham says, I'm going to love this Intel Arc GPU. Well, I have an Intel Arc that was in the prior streamer, and I upgraded that so I could use AV1 encoding, although now AMD CPUs allow for that, the newer ones. Same with NVIDIA cards, too. NVIDIA cards are now enabling that. Mark Stanley Sr. says, good afternoon, Carey and chat. I have an iPrada mini PC with an AMI board. AMI is a BIOS, not a board, unless you mean AMD. I cannot get into the BIOS. Any help would be appreciated. Another way that you can get into the BIOS, I'll show you here in just a minute. This is the same with Windows 10 and Windows 11. But let's wrap up. Wow, that screen looks funky. Let's wrap up our installation first. Wow, that did not synchronize to my capture card at all. United States, yes. US, yes. Skip. I don't have internet. Continue with limited setup. User, I'll just put user. Enter, blank password. This is happening because the wrong video driver is being used. It should self-correct once we get a Windows update and get the driver automatically. But I should be able to scroll down, even though we've got the wrong resolution. It's a little painful. But, you know, this does look a little bit different in that it's massively zoomed in. In a situation like this, it's just not detecting the monitor correctly. So we can temporarily hook up a different monitor if this really bothers you. Or if you're as familiar with this as I am, you can almost do this blindfolded anyway. So it's all still there. It's just really, really zoomed in. Except that. And then once we go through this final process, it'll take us to the desktop. We are done with our Windows installation media. We can remove that. I'll wait. We're done with the flash drive. We can erase that and put it back in the drawer as a blank flash drive for other purposes, usually BIOS updates, but whatever I might need a small capacity flash drive for. That's why I always have these. They're very inexpensive. I think Mara should add another link for these SAM, not SanDisk, but SAM Data 5-pack. They're very inexpensive. They're slow. They're small capacity. They're exactly what you need for like a memtest boot drive, or you could even use it as a Windows 11 or Windows 10 installation media, a BIOS flash drive. There are a lot of purposes to a smaller flash drive that's inexpensive, and if it fails, you just throw it away. It costs more in postage to get a warranty on that than it's worth. So in just a moment, we'll have this booted. It's going to need the AMD Adrenalin software and probably other drivers, right? We've talked about this in the past. Hopefully, we can plug the internet into it now, and that little globe there will turn into a little monitor. So let's do that right now. Let's take the flash drive out. That's our installation media. Let's plug internet in. And if our network card driver is loaded, that will automatically become a little screen there. And it usually takes a few seconds to initialize. And it did. That means that we can now go to Windows Update. Oh, look, Armory Crate software update. Would you like to install Armory Crate? Let's say yes, because that will give us our drivers direct from ASUS. But they'll also try and throw Norton and other, what I think is terrible bloatware, if you're not paying attention. So if you're going to use this, some companies like ASRock are very straightforward and not deceptive the way ASUS is in this. It bugs me that in this day and age, ASUS is still playing these old 90s games. Be aware of it. If we wanted to reboot into the BIOS, I want to show you. You can go to your settings, right? You hit the start button, go to settings. Go to Windows Update. Now you'll see it's automatically checking for updates. There's nothing I can do to stop that. It doesn't matter. I'm going to turn a few options on here that I prefer. I want to receive updates automatically for other things like Microsoft Office and other Microsoft products. I want it to keep me up to date, and I want it to notify me. I don't want it to just restart without telling me. So it's going to notify me, hey, you need to restart, whenever it's convenient. I wish this was all turned on by default. It's pretty important stuff. Anyway, getting back to Windows Update. If you scroll down to Advanced Options, right where we were, you should see an option for Recovery. And under Recovery, you would click Advanced Startup. And under Advanced Startup, you'll see an option that says, Restart my computer into the BIOS. It's that easy to get into your BIOS. This has been the same now since Windows 10 came out. The reason I'm not proceeding forward with it is it does require a bit of a restart to bring up the next menu. And I don't want to interrupt the installation of the Armory crate, but try that and let me know if that works. I appreciate all the members who support the channel and make these videos possible. If I spent this much time making videos that weren't generating revenue, how would I pay the rent, the electric bill, for all the cameras and for all the equipment? I would be busy working for a paying client right now. Your ability, your willingness to support the channel gives me this opportunity to spend my time with you without risking losing my house or the ability to eat at the end of the day or have some Gatorade. I'm not getting rich off of it, but I really love what I do. And as far as YouTube's concerned, this without your support is no longer financially sustainable at all. I might be able to get a tank or two of gas at the end of the month after producing 15 videos based on what YouTube monetization pays now. It is pathetic. And yet the cost of making the videos only goes up. The electricity cost goes up, the rent price goes up, the insurance prices go up. Everything's costing more. So, with your contributions, your voluntary support of this channel, I would not be here nearly as often. I always enjoy making videos, but I could not make as many as often because I would run out of money and be homeless. So I would probably be reducing videos to one, maybe two a month. And then those would be completely at my expense. Basically, I'd be paying you to watch me. So I don't want to have to do that. However, I don't have to with your support. And so for those of you who support me, thank you from the bottom of my heart for enabling me to stay home and not have to go out in the heat and deal with customers. And for those of you who watch the videos for free all over the world, I hope you appreciate the contributors, because without them, you would not have the content to watch. I've had people say, I can't afford to pay anything to watch the videos. And I'm like, I can't afford to make the videos without you offering to help support. So we're both in the same boat. Like, whatever excuse you've got to not support the channel is the same excuse I have that prevents the videos from even existing. That would prevent the videos from existing. And then there wouldn't be any content to watch. So if you're enjoying the content, don't thank me. Thank those who put money where their mouth is and support this channel, because without them, it just wouldn't be happening right now. Looks like I have another package arriving. Oh, look, our video driver loaded. See that? That looks much better now. My internet connection is very slow here. Studio C should be about 10 times faster than, 100 times faster than this, actually. 80 times? And I don't do the math, but regardless, we should be in a really good place with our internet connection at Studio C, and much of this will take so long. Let me go check very quickly while we're waiting what's arrived, so I'll be right back. All right. That was a mini PC that I ordered. That's coming up for a future review. And a new mini ITX case that I can't wait to show you. Maybe we'll get to those this week if all goes well. In the meantime, yeah, this Armory crate is taking forever. Part of the reason, keep in mind, we're also downloading Windows updates in the background. So as if my internet connection wasn't bad enough, it's simultaneously downloading two separate things on a slow connection, cutting that connection speed in half for each thing. It is what it is. But I'm glad to have resolved the issues, and I'm glad to be able to share the experience with you so that you can learn without any of the risk of your money at play. Because if you add up the cost of this motherboard and the CPU and this video card and this power supply and that RAM and that SSD, you get an idea of how much this cost just for me to show it to you, right? I need the parts in order to demonstrate the lesson. When I go to sell these parts, I'll be lucky. I will be lucky if someone offers me half of what I paid for them. So it's costing money to make the videos, and I can't stress that enough. And for people who say, well, it's always about the money, well, I guess for you, it's always about the videos. So I could sell out and just make commercials for big corporations, and they can tell me what to say and pay me very handsomely for doing so, which is effectively selling you, my audience, to a massive manufacturer. So I get a big check. I don't want to do it. I think I'd rather go help people in their businesses than make videos like that. And if you want videos like that, almost every tech channel on this platform, the vast majority anyway, are bought and paid for by corporate Americans. So if you like that, enjoy your commercials. No idea how much that despises me. I taste vile in my mouth. It bothers me that much. But, you know, look, not every content creator has experience and knowledge they want to share. They want to be influencers. They want the popularity, and they want a big paycheck. Can I just want all of it? No, I like to keep these actual lessons. This is how I taught, and people that took my college course. This is exactly how I teach, and the students that attended my course paid for it. If they didn't like it, they could go get their money back. So you can imagine from my perspective, if I hear anybody complain what they voluntarily watch they don't like, why did you watch it? You know, ask for a refund. But such is the life of social media. Now that looks like we're getting ready finally where we can get our drivers from ASUS, and we may not even need them, quite frankly. With Windows Update, especially on a board that's a little bit older, we may automatically get the updates. If you're getting a brand new motherboard, brand new chip, stuff that just came out within the last 12 months, there's probably some drivers that are not provided by Microsoft yet because it's brand new hardware that recently got introduced. That's normal, and in which case you would go to the manufacturer of the motherboard for your drivers or of your add-in cards for any cards you're adding in. Go directly to the manufacturer. In my opinion, using any third-party driver providers, especially ones that want to charge you, it's great 25 years ago. It's not so great today. Easier, cheaper, faster way that's far more reliable. And that's simply go to your manufacturer's website. Get those drivers for free. You'll always get the right driver the first time, and they'll never charge you for it. Okay, we're ready to, oh, now it's installing. Never mind. Let me go back to my Windows Update. What's that doing? Where did my Windows Update go? Yikes, that's not what I wanted. Windows. Check for updates. That's what I want. Oh, look how much smaller that is now. That was the full screen window from before our driver loaded. The difference pixels can make, huh? And then, you know, there's a few settings I like to change, like the power settings. So I type in the word edit, so edit power plan comes up. I'll set the monitor to go off after 3 hours. I never want a computer to go to sleep unless it has batteries. So like a laptop, tablet. Otherwise, it's a waste. It just creates problems. I don't like this little cartoony thing down here on the search bar, so I type in search permissions. Once I type in search per, it fills it in. I hit enter, scroll all the way to the bottom. This last setting, it says more settings. Turn that off, and it gets rid of that little cartoon down there. And then, of course, I don't like notifications, so I'll come over here. And we're going to clear the notifications we've got. I'm not interested in those. And I'll just type notifications down here, notification as far as, you know, I need to until the suggestion, and I'll just switch those off so I'm not bothered by it. The other thing I'll turn off is a bunch of stuff here on the taskbar and change the defaults to the exact opposite of where they are. Off, 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 and then I'll come down to system tray icons. I don't use Microsoft OneDrive, but I do want to be able to safely remove and eject media. I want to see my antivirus status, and I want to see my Windows Update status. I don't want those hidden. So by turning these buttons on, that determines what's going to show to me down here versus what's going to be behind the arrow I have to click on to see. I should not have to click on to see running tasks. And I'm not running Microsoft OneDrive. And yet all the running tasks I need, they've hidden. And the one task I don't need, they're displaying. So if Microsoft has it set one way, you probably want it the other way. And if you ever get a pop-up where Microsoft says, accept these changes, they're probably, if you slow down and read it, they're probably wanting to set your search engine back to Bing and take back control of all your customization. And you want to cancel that, not accept it. Or you're going to be having to change it all back by hand again. So anyway, I think that'll wrap it up for today's video. We'll quickly just take a look in the device manager. What's our status here? Yeah, it doesn't even look like we need the Armory crate. All of our drivers are there. It even sees the Intel Arc A380 automatically. That's it. We're done. As for activation, I don't know if this was previously activated. As you witnessed, I did not put a product key in. Let's see. Activation state is active. That means that the product key that I entered one time and one time only, however many months or years it was, into this motherboard, it's not embedded in the BIOS. That's not how it works anymore. Yes, Dell and HP and big manufacturers still do that. But system builders, ever since Windows 10, once you enter your product key once, you never need to enter it again unless you change your motherboard or unless you reuse that product key on another board that supersedes this one and it trades it. Or somebody steals your product key and they use it on their motherboard. And then it says, hey, your hardware's changed. You need to buy a new key. You may be a victim of theft or you tried to use that on more than one system. If it's all on the up and up, this will stay active and automatically reassign the product key from the Windows activation servers based on the serial number of your motherboard. You never have to enter your product key ever again, even on a clean install, as I've just demonstrated. We never put a product key in. And whatever that product key is, I couldn't tell you, but it is in the registry as though we entered it. And it's the same as the one we had before on this motherboard. That is a normal part of Windows 10 and 11. And as you can see, I did not log in with a Microsoft account, so that is not required for that feature. If your product is not auto-activating, that was activated prior, is what I want to say. That's because you either installed a different version of Windows than your license key was for, your license key was stolen, or you changed your motherboard. That's it. That easy. Kelly Stewart says hello, wants me to check my phone. Right on. Thank you, Kelly. I will do that. I forgot. I was just about ready to say goodbye. We're at 2.5 hours. So between yesterday and today, we've had a couple of live streams that have run long. And what does it say? Kelly Stewart sent an Amazon gift card for $50. Right on. Thank you, Kelly. You the man. A customer has sent me a link to 2 different laptops at Costco, which is weird because it's Amazon Prime Day, but maybe Costco's got some deal on Amazon Prime Day here. And he says, I need to know which of these 2 is better. And you know how I answer better, right? It's subjective. Which candy bar is better? Should I get the Kit Kat bar or should I get the Lindt milk chocolate bar? So I'm going to have a phone call with this customer. This is an actual customer. And I'm going to have to basically ask him what he's looking for out of a, it looks like he's sending me a couple of 2-in-1 tablet laptop deals. I'm not a fan of those in general. Mara's been using the Minis Forum V3, which is that little tablet 3-in-1, and she's loving it. Me personally, I mean, this is the only time you see me using the tablet for accessing the chat room. Otherwise, this never moves from this stand. I have no other use for it. I'd rather use my phone and preferably give me a proper size screen and a keyboard and a mouse. I don't want to touch the screen other than if I have to on a portable device. I don't want a laptop with a touch screen. It'd be hard to use a tablet without a touch screen. It'd be hard to use a cell phone without a touch screen. But the screen space is so limited. I don't like the idea of being on a battery. It adds to anxiety, how much of my battery's left. So this screen here, let's finish up setting up your PC. The best way to do this is to hit continue and then to hit skip, and it won't bother you anymore. Then when it says, we want to have access to your browsing data, I say not now. Then it still wants you to add a Microsoft account. You can hit cancel and skip for now. You got to tell Microsoft twice. If we said hold this off for 3 days, this whole thing will start again and again and again and again. It's only if you go through those steps will it go away until some other Windows update months from now reactivates that. That's how you answer those questions without taking on any of the changes and without having it constantly come up every time you restart your computer, in case you were wondering how to properly get rid of that. Looking down here, I can see this would have been hidden and I wouldn't know that we have issues in here. I don't care that I'm not signed in, so that one doesn't bother me, but this one does bother me. This should be turned on by default. Now we should be happy. But if that was hidden behind this little arrow, I would never know. That's why it's important that I can see these things, these items. I want to see if I'm connected to the internet. I want to see and have access to the volume in my speakers or the speaker output if I want headphones or speakers, if there's multiple potential outputs. And I want to see the status of my antivirus. Why would Microsoft hide all that by default? It's nuts. But, you know, what can I say? What's nuts for me may not be nuts for you. Let's go ahead and, oh, they're still doing updates. Let's go back to Windows Update and see what it's doing. Okay, we'll let that run. But that's it for a show. I mean, we're done. We're good. All right, guys. Thank you again for being members. Thank you for doing what most viewers won't do, and that is helping support the channel financially. It wouldn't exist without you at this point. It's pretty bad. From YouTube monetization alone, people think their view is worth something. It isn't anymore. It's worth something, but it's almost so little. It's whether it's there or not is so insignificant, it doesn't matter anymore. It used to be you were paying for the content by watching it because the monetization valued those eyeballs, not so much anymore. So it's not my choice. That's just how it is. But that's why suddenly this has become a big problem. And you'll see a lot of YouTube channels can't afford to stay in business. It looks like, you know, even the big ones like Hot Ones, you know, Hot Ones where the people eat the spicy wings where they get interviewed. That one may not be around much longer if the rumors are true. It costs a lot of money to produce and the revenue's not there. So yeah, that may cease to exist in a few, well, maybe by the end of the year. We'll see. We've lost so many channels and we're still losing them. They're holding on as long as they can, but if this doesn't turn around, maybe there'll be more viewers left for those of us still doing it. Peter said, I showed my father those mini PCs. He likes them because he has to go to Windows 11. That's still over a year away. He has a company, but thanks to the mini PC reviews, my father likes it. Oh, they're great for office work, for sure. Al Perez said, I missed a lot of the live streams. Becoming a member is a way of giving back. Thanks to Carey for his videos. Helps me relax while taking care of my mom. Well, thank you, Al. Ron Barnish says it's very cheap entertainment. Well, I hope it's very cheap education. Entertainment could be free. Although the last time I bought concert tickets, it set me back over $400. So maybe I should rethink that logic. Where did my chat room go? Darn it. I'm having some issues with the chat room on this tablet here. Where's my live chat? I want to say goodbye. There it is. Mara says using that Minisforum V3 laptop tablet is so nice to use. Well, I'm glad she likes it because I wouldn't. I mean, it's for what it is. I got no complaints. I just don't have any reason to use something like that regardless. Mark Gaines says, great stream, Carey. Learned a lot tonight. Well, thank you, Mark. Mark joining us from Northern Ireland. I heard from my sister who is currently visiting Dublin and sent me a picture of fish and chips from Dublin, which was just cruel. I'm in a desert. Do you think I'm going to get fish and chips like they eat every day in Dublin? And our friend Mitch, he's down there in Australia on vacation. Everybody's on vacation but me. I'm here busting my butt, trying to move from Studio B to Studio C, get Studio C renovated, get these videos made, get my customers helped, get my violin out. Bill Sony T says, me too. Great stream, Carey. Thank you, Bill. David Graham said, last time I went to a concert, it cost $16. That must have been 1983. Shop Persian Rugs with a $1 super chat. Thank you for that. And Jose Lopez with another $1 super chat. Thank you, Kelly Stewart, for your Amazon gift card. Thank you to our friends Buster out there in Scotland, Frankie B and Oystein. Oystein's in Norway, Frankie B's in New York. These are very generous contributors that are helping out in a way that's almost embarrassing. Their generosity and their support is more than I get from my own family. Yeah, well, I suppose that's not a high bar. But nonetheless, I can't thank them enough. Our friends at Acronis have a very exciting announcement. I don't know if I can share it with you yet. Let me go to their website. They've gone public with this information. This is kind of a big deal. And I think many of you will agree with me that this was the right decision. Acronis went through a name change of the well-known popular brand Acronis TrueImage. And they changed it to Acronis Cyber Protect Home. And they were really trying to emphasize the whole cyber and internet. And in such doing, kind of lost their brand awareness. And we had some discussion about it. My concern that, you know, you've got an established, well-known brand name here that you're throwing away. And, you know, like anything else, it goes under meetings and such, and I don't expect anything to happen. When I got an email the other day that said, it wasn't just me, but others, but certainly what I said was taken under consideration. And Acronis Cyber Protect Home is reverted back to Acronis TrueImage. That is its proper name, back the way it was. So now when I mistakenly call it Acronis TrueImage, it's actually called Acronis TrueImage. Yay! It's easier to say, it's less complex to explain cyber protect. I know they're trying to include the antivirus by saying protect. I know they're trying to include the internet by saying cyber. I know that these things weren't an issue back when TrueImage first came out. But TrueImage has established a brand name and reputation that is far more familiar, and it is at its heart backup and cloning software, and that has never changed. So no matter what other bells, whistles, and features they add to it, its core is always the same, that it's backup and imaging software, cloning software. If you are not using any backup software, you're just playing with matches, man. You're in the woods, surrounded by dry trees, playing with matches. It's not going to end well. Back your stuff up. If you don't know how, watch one of our video interviews with Acronis, with Begowden, and we walk through the entire install and usage, 15-day free trial, the backups free to make during that 15 days. After the 15 days, you can't make any more backups, but you can always restore. So if you don't buy the product in a year and a half from now, the unexpected happens, and the only backup you have is the one you made from following our video for free, you can go back and re-download the Acronis software. Even though your trial's over, they will always let you restore. And I told them that's a mistake. It should be the other way around. They should always let you back up. It costs money to do the restore, and they disagree. But if it was my company, I'd reverse that. So just because I recommended a name change doesn't mean that they did it because of me. Because they, in my opinion, I think it would make more sense to say you can make all the backups you want for free, but if you ever want to restore them, you got to pay up. But here's the thing, Acronis is cheap. The fact that, you know, they're not gouging, they're not saying you got to pay, you know, blood money. It's when me and Mitch go to Arby's for lunch, it costs me more than a whole year's subscription to Acronis. And that provides me sustenance for a year of service and support. Arby's is going to fill me up temporarily and then make me regret it the next 20 hours. And I paid money for that. There's better ways to spend your money, is all I'm saying. And if your data is not worth $30, maybe it's worth $300 to send it off to $300 data recovery when you lose it. I don't know. But that'll wrap it up for me for today. My thanks again to all the supporters. And again, to the viewers. I appreciate all the viewers. I just wish YouTube did. What am I going to do? And yeah, I'm glad we got to experience these lessons together. The need for a graphics card on some CPU, which you could Google and you don't have to figure out the hard way the way I did. The fact that BIOS batteries die quickly if the systems aren't plugged in for a long time. How to update a BIOS and how to be patient to determine if the BIOS update has failed. And just because there's a failure after the BIOS update doesn't mean it has anything to do with the BIOS update. I understand why you would think so, but we've demonstrated in a live video how your mind can play games with you on what's actually happening in reality. And that's going to determine how much joy you get out of this, if it's a hobby, or how much personal rewards you get out of it if it's a career, or you choose to make it a career. That's all on the voluntary way you choose to react and respond to what you're interpreting. So changing a perspective is as critical of a skill as the technical skill I'm trying to teach. There's an attitude that goes hand in hand with the tools. I don't want a doctor doing surgery on me who's got a bad attitude. Guy comes in, he had an argument with his wife, or she had an argument with her partner, whatever it is. And now they're going to do delicate patient surgery on me. Well, they're like, oh, I can't believe it. Talk to me that way. No. Attitude plays a major role in how successful you will be in diagnosing and repairing, as equal to or greater than the tools and the knowledge you have. So with that, I'll end today's show. Thank you to Marlena, as always, for doing all the background administrative work, including adding the links to the video notes as we discuss them. She asked me today, what am I filming today? I said, I don't know. I'll have to watch and find out. Even she didn't know. I didn't know. And sometimes that's the best content. I think it worked out really well today. That'll wrap it up for me. Again, our friends at Acronis, at RoboForm, at VIP CDK Deals, all offering discounts to you. All the links are in the video notes below. And we got to get Begowden back on here and talk about this name change and what else is going on at Acronis. So you can look forward to that coming very soon. I should see you all again Thursday. If not, definitely on Friday. We are live every single Friday at 1 o'clock. And we've got to do part 2 of the build that we started last Friday. We're going to try and finish that up this Friday. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all of your support and your kindness. I will see you all very, very soon. Until next time, bye for now.